Hello, and welcome to our conversation today about creating safe and welcoming spaces with Tiffany Craig as part of the Aboriginal Health Team. I'd like to welcome you all to this session. My name is Leslie Bonshore. I'm from the Shapton First Nation, also the Nooksack Indian Tribe, and I'm the Executive Director of Aboriginal Health here at Vancouver Coastal Health, and I'd love for Tiffany to introduce herself as well.
My name is Tiffany Craig. I'm from the Tahltan Nation in northern BC, and I'm the Indigenous Design Lead for Aboriginal Health at Vancouver Coastal Health. I think it's been almost 3 years. We're coming almost 3 years. Does that sound about right? Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Just gone by
Yes.
so fast.
I know, I just celebrated my 5-year. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
where did time go? It's been very exciting. I've been so privileged to be able to work with you, Tiffany, on this agenda and on this particular area of interest. It's been exceptional and such a great learning. Tell us a little bit more about how you got into Indigenous design.
I'm still very, very unsure about that question.
Mm-hmm.
I've been processing it a little bit. I started out doing international work overseas in Egypt and in Palestine. That's what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I had this very intense experience in Palestine, as you do, in the middle of what's going on there, and decided to come back and go to school, which was an anomaly for me because as a little Indigenous kid who was bounced from school to school, I never thought that education, higher education, was in the cards for me.
Yeah.
So I started out my degree in international studies, focusing on security and conflict, and then I did a double minor in First Nation studies and cultural anthropology, and then a post-bachelorette in sustainable community development, and then a master's in community and regional planning. And this is from a kid who hardly went to elementary school, hardly went to high school. I had to reteach myself everything.
That's amazing.
It still blows my mind. And for my master's, I had to do an internship. And so I chose an internship with an architecture company in Toronto because I've only had the BC experience and I wanted to get a different perspective. And that's how it started. Because I was not only just an intern planner and an intern designer, but I was also community engagement specialist for the placemaking association.
Well, I am so glad you decided to go to school, and I'm so glad that you were able to find your way in post-secondary, because we also, as you know, as Aboriginal Health, Indigenous Health, and Vancouver Coastal Health, we have a huge priority of recruitment and retention of Indigenous employees too, for all sorts of areas. So you're the one kind of story that we keep hearing about, right? Is that people think, oh no, post-secondary is not for me. Those institutions aren't for me. And then when you get there and you find your place, because space and place is so important. If you find your place and safety in that place, you can excel and you can stay.
I never found my place or my safety. It never, every single day didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like my voice was being heard, and I constantly had to fight for the projects that I wanted to work on.
Ah, interesting. See, I've seen this feisty side of you, which has always made me think Tiffany's the person for the job. You've come in to help us at a time when we really needed some help. We've got a lovely partner in Tarnjeet, Macaulay, amazing partner to be able to see what we were talking about, because sometimes when we talk about Indigenous design and all the stuff that you studied there and the impact that you can have from all of those pieces, that you, in our culture, we call, filling your basket with all of your knowledge. So your knowledge basket is full of all of these different experiences, and being able to bring that into Vancouver Coastal Health to help us as we reimagine how we build our buildings and how we refresh and redesign existing buildings has been phenomenal. But it took us from starting ground zero.
Ground zero, yeah.
Tell us a bit about how 3 years ago when we first started these conversations along with Bree, share with the rest of the viewers, the audience here, about how you approached that and why you approached it the way you did.
The first project that I was brought onto, I guess we could back it up even more. I put together guidelines, but the guidelines that I put together was really from conversations that I had with other Indigenous, I'm not an architect, but with Indigenous designers and architects that I worked with and who I networked with out east and, across Canada. It's really hard to find any kind of content that's published, that's written about, that's talked about. You really have to do a pretty deep dive, and even then it's quite private conversations, and so I kind of used my leverage that way to start out with the guidelines, and that's how we got going. And then from there I just realized that most of the, not in Aboriginal health, but in capital projects, because that's who we're supporting, that's who we're collaborating with, I noticed that a lot of the project managers are so quite cautious and scared to do Indigenous engagement. They don't know what conversations they should have, how they should go about it, because they're so worried about stepping on people's toes.
There's always a lot of fear base holding us back from doing what we think we know is right.
Yeah.
And I certainly have found that in working with you and working with all of the leaders that we have worked with in Vancouver Coastal Health, we don't have resistance.
No.
None at all.
No.
We actually just have that fear base of not knowing if they're doing the right thing or if they have the approval or are allowed. That's kind of the language. Am I allowed to do this? So I think that's been part of the wonderful journey of, and you and I have spoken about our roles here in Vancouver Coastal Health as being teachers.
Yeah.
Of being patient but generous with knowledge and working alongside these leaders and helping them to understand the how and the why. And I know your guidelines were quite hard to write too. I know you cobbled together from many, many experiences. We talked a lot about, international travel and seeing what the Maoris have done in New Zealand, what they do in Australia and Alaska, and bringing all of that, which is the stuff I saw in my travels, and merging all of this into some sort of meaningful guideline that somebody could actually read and breathe some life into without being too scriptive and putting people in boxes or this work into a box, because it is clearly a very creative process too, which is why I think your sense of flair and fashion and design is so important, right? It's more than just the bricks and mortar. There's something being done here in this process. If you could just take us through one of them.
So when I was having the conversations with my associates, I guess we can say, about how they go about their work and the guidelines that they follow, I realized that we needed to have an advisory group that we could co-create with. And so I had a lot of conversations and figured out which elders would enjoy being at the table with me and would enjoy doing the co-creation process of designing these buildings together. And that was really the jump start to all of this. And so I come from a matrilineal society, And the land that we're on here in Vancouver runs off of a matrilineal society in their governance, and that's how we approach the design lens of everything that we're doing.
So important. We talk about acknowledging land, right, as we start meetings or we start different events, and we're actually starting to ask everybody, can you take it a little deeper? And this is what we mean by taking it a little deeper, is really looking at the land, what was here before, what are the worldviews of the cultural practices of the people who protected and took care of this land all these years. So I love that you brought in the matriarchal side of things. I know you've done a lot of work with Elder Doris Fox, Elder Glida, all of our beautiful matriarchal elders that work with us in Aboriginal health. They've been very instrumental, extremely instrumental.
Extremely. And they brought, it's not a different way because that way has always been here, but it's a different way to the project managers, to the builders, to the architects who are also working on these projects. And it's also a different way to the city who is approving the zoning and all of the bureaucratic things that we have to deal with when you're building large-scale, long-term buildings in a city. So
that should represent and should acknowledge, not only through truth and reconciliation and the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and certainly Vancouver claimed itself as a city of reconciliation, years and years ago. And what does that mean? Define that for us, right? So, not to go too far into, what it means for the city of Vancouver, because we're talking about how design works in Vancouver coastal health and some of the projects that we've gotten ourselves involved with, which have been exciting, and all the different ones in the neighborhood of the downtown east side, as it's known and referred to. It's Dogwood, Pearson. It's places like that, even our own space, how we can take a blank wall and turn it into this beautiful, warm, representative, comfortable place for Indigenous people, which is what we use this room for, is gathering of many of our Indigenous folks in the urban setting. When we walk into, or we arrive home at YVR, right? Or anybody who's ever been to that airport. Instant.
Stress relief, instant safety.
The sounds, is literally everything all consuming. And I know I feel so proud every time I land in YVR and come home and see the art, see the totem poles, hear the sounds, see the weavings, the beautiful weavings of the musqueam, the sparrow family. I mean, it resonates. And then you leave that and you drive through and it's all behind. So, the time has come that we take that and spread it and sprinkle it out throughout the organization. Super excited about the project we've got at VGH, right? At Vancouver General Hospital, where later on this month and beginning of November, putting up these beautiful house posts that have been carved by Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, because design and bringing these things into our existing space is also very important. But what,
and also, that's just the first phase, because it is going to be expanded out further into not just those 3 pieces, but the 2 floors, the 2 main entrance floors, which is quite big for a general hospital. And I believe that's going to be the first for a general hospital in Vancouver.
Yes, in Vancouver. I think there's been poles outside in courtyards and things like that, but not inside the building. Again, it speaks to a number of different things. It's our act of reconciliation of acknowledging Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh is part of it. But I think one of the areas where we're having sometimes a bit of difficulty is pulling through from that design to how it aligns with health and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I know we talked about this, research, trying to find evidence
Yeah.
that these spaces can create safety, can improve health outcomes, but it is true. It is absolutely true. We have it anecdotally, but hopefully one day we'll get to a place, because we also started our own research team, but hopefully we will get to a place where we can actually measure some of the impacts of how it makes people feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know probably our advisory committee
Mm-hmm.
has already shared with you and with me about how the spaces currently make them feel
Yeah.
without any design, right? Without any design added, without Indigenous design concepts added. Right now, what do they feel like? What have we heard? Institutional?
The biggest one is reliving the residential schools and how that made them feel with having to be someone completely different in order to fit into a space that wasn't their own. And
Wasn't designed for them?
it wasn't designed for them. It was designed to erase them, and you can feel that when you go into it. And you can also feel that, like, that's what the whole premise of cities are.
Mm.
They're built, designed for what the builders want you to believe and what they want you to see. And that means that they're going to build over and erase the truth. Yeah. And so our job, my job, is to make sure that everybody knows when they walk into a space the history of the land that that building is on, the ancestral knowledge, which is so many different things tied into that. And so there's so many different areas you can go to with design. And it's about having Indigenous people and people of color and feel seen and valued enough to know that budget has been put aside and put into the building for them.
Yeah. And the earlier you get involved in that process, the better. As you know, our partners inside our facilities team are starting to really understand and grab onto and say,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, we need Tiffany now because we're about to start planning something. And I think that's fantastic because it is not additional cost.
No.
It's usually
No.
not much more cost at all when you set that intention in the beginning.
It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Cost and budget is irrelevant. It's just figuring out where to put it and how to put it into a rhetoric that this system works on.
Yeah. Good point. Right? No
Yeah.
matter what, they're going to put paint up. No matter what, they're going to make public art part of the complex. I think actually that's one of the areas in which the city requires you to, you know, add public art to any new build. Yeah, I think it's really important. I saw it firsthand in a couple of places, you know, in Wabano, for example, when we took a few folks over to Wabano Health Center in Ottawa to take a look at how they designed this amazing building that I just kept hearing about. And I thought, I gotta go see this for myself. And we were able to take Marcel Swain from Luma and his team. And when he came back and built Luma Medical Center, he incorporated many of the Indigenous design concepts we saw in our travels into their clinic, which is absolutely beautiful. There's nothing like it, right? You go in there and you can see medicines as soon as you walk in. You see stonework, the river rock on the walls, the color scheme is all, you know, really resonates with our people. A great big star blanket on the wall as soon as you walk in, which is amazing. And then in the back, they've created almost like a mini longhouse, a real beautiful cedar wrapped healing space. Another one that built off of that Kalala Lalem in the downtown east side, another clinic that has recently opened under a cooperative with several different partners involved. I went in there one day I had to meet with the leadership team there, and I overheard some of their patients waiting in the waiting area, which also looked stunning and welcoming, really looked beautiful in there. And I overheard them with big smiles on their face saying, "Can you believe this is for us?
Yeah.
Can you believe this is for us?" Because you know what he meant? I think I could layer all sorts of things within that comment. One was, it was brand new.
Yeah.
It was crisp, clean, new.
Thought was put in
Yeah.
to take them into consideration, which makes it a safer space, because you just feel like if you're going to walk in and you've already been taken into consideration, then the discrimination isn't going to be as heavy as other places. And we're seeing this a lot in our healthcare, especially during this pandemic. The gaps that we have always known are there are just becoming quite visible now, and
Amplified.
it's quite amplified.
Yeah, very amplified. And these people, like, who sits in the waiting area admiring their surroundings? Not often do you hear that. And especially, the urban Indigenous population often feel unseen, unheard, uncomfortable in their surroundings. They don't feel welcome. So I just found that to be, that's the testimony right there, that Indigenous design concepts built in to clinic space is so important. And that ability to decrease anxiety, right, of what's coming behind us,
I mean, maybe this is a little naive of me, but I also would like to believe that if you walk into, like the UPCC that we're working on right now, two big walls like these, there's a big mural that's going in, and then there's going to be another mural going to a talking room, and the whole interior design and colors have been pulled from the mural. And so it's going to be, a wayfinding feature. And my goal and my hopes with that is that the staff that work there, it's kind of hard to be as racist when you're in a space like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I always feel like these are watching me every time I'm in this room. So, I know, and Jerry Whitehead's beautiful work here, and Paul Windsor is in many of our other spaces. I know our Heatley Clinic and I want to say Penter, but maybe it's DCHC, also have Jerry Whitehead's paintings on their walls. This is all part of the big picture, is spreading the responsibility, sharing responsibility, making everyone feel culturally safe.
And that's like those are two things right there out of the guidelines. It's co-creation and reciprocal.
Yes, you told me about some of the other elements of the guidelines, and they really are principles, but they come from our worldview too.
Exactly.
Yeah, they come from an Indigenous worldview where nothing about us without us, right?
Everyone should be at the table. You shouldn't be outnumbered. There should be an equal amount. The table shouldn't always be at one space. You should also go to
meet people where they're at.
That's just it. That's been a little bit more of a challenging one, but I think that it's improved. It's improved a lot.
Yeah. It's hard when we're so used to, conducting business in a boardroom.
Yeah.
And the Indigenous way, of course, if we were to, as we are, Indigenous health leaders, trying to decolonize everything we do too, and still fit within the structure of these kinds of organizations. But every time we do bring people to community or follow the protocols, they get it.
Mhm.
Once you go and you see and you're part of it, you can't deny that it's a very important component of the work. Seeing is believing, showing up is really important.
Mhm.
What it sends, the message it sends to our Indigenous population is we see you and you are important and we are coming to you because we need something from you. And realizing that that's not an extractive model,
No.
that we're not saying, go and take. When you go, you have to give. Like, even our protocols are, if I'm going to come and ask Tiffany to do something for me, a piece of work on my behalf, I would normally come to you with a gift.
Yeah.
And say, Tiffany, I've got some work in my heart that I need to have done, and I know you can help me. Would you help me? And then there's this gifting that happens. We're not quite there, and we probably won't be, but as much as we can, our team likes to practice that. We have, a supply of blankets that we can bring people. That would be the normal gift that we would give to somebody we're asking to do work for us.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we'll get there. We'll get there.
I think we'll get there. We can write it in.
Yeah, write it in. Make it part of the guidelines, which aren't policy. They're guidelines because they're not policy yet. Right? We got to write the law. No. But we do have to start somewhere. And this is what, you and I had lots of conversations your early days. I remember thinking, oh, she's going to leave. She's going to leave us because it's hard work and it takes a lot of patience and we have to be generous with our knowledge and patient. Know that we're in this for the long run, that we're on this marathon together, not a sprint, and one by one we're going to get there. And I can honestly say, I can't believe it's been 3 years, but in 3 years you've made a significant impact to Vancouver Coastal House facilities, the project managers and the design, and again, when you look, we briefly spoke about First and Clark, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the before
mm-hmm.
the Tiffany effect came in
mm-hmm.
to the after the Tiffany effect, and the change, not huge, not gazillions of dollars,
no,
just intentional design elements inside and outside that really stand out and make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to share a little bit about that process?
So First and Clark is, it's a three-tier partnership.
Yeah.
So for Vancouver Coastal Health, it's Withdrawal Management Center, and I believe it's 5 to 6 levels for withdrawal management. Different levels, obviously, to detoxing. And then there's BC Housing, which is low income housing, which is going to be on the top. And then on the bottom to the left is supposed to be an Indigenous
Social enterprise.
Thank you, social
Mm-hmm.
enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came on board, it was already well into, all of the decisions had been made. The whole building was designed, the exterior was designed, the colors, the materials, everything was chosen and budgeted.
Mm.
So we've mentioned 2 of the guidelines already, and another one is process-based, which means no fast tracking, which means taking the time to have the conversations, to do the relationship building, and to put that into your RFP or your RFQ. And I came after the RFP was already assigned. It looked, and it's a substantially sized building that's going to be there for an extremely long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it just looked like another residential school from the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The coloring was horrible. I don't know if I should be saying this.
In your opinion.
In my opinion.
Personal opinion.
In my personal opinion.
Yeah.
It was just beige and brown with brown brick, and that's it.
Didn't stand out from any other building that
No.
we would normally see in that corridor or anywhere
No.
else in the city. I totally understand
No.
that.
And the entranceways, specifically to the sacred space, because we were working on that as well, the sacred space and the withdrawal management doors, there's two, were so narrow, which is pretty common and pretty normal with detox centers in Vancouver. But the thing about this place is it's an amalgamation of a couple different detox centers that they're going to be closing down and I think turning into housing and making this the main one, which is a big deal. If it's the main place that people are going to for help.
Mm-hmm.
So I kicked up a stink and brought the elders on board, talked about what that land, the stories of that land and what it held and what sustenance it provided well before Vancouver was built, and it was a place of harvesting, of gathering medicine and food. There was a village nearby. There was a couple spiritual water portals. So much to go off of. So we decided to go with the theme of the cedar tree, but not from it being just a tree, from the metaphor of what the cedar tree brings, which is caretaking,
It's everything to us.
medicine,
Yes.
spiritual.
Yeah.
You are welcome here. We could do a whole hour on the cedar
The
tree,
cedar
but
tree.
you get the gist of
Yeah.
it. So we ended up making the podium look like a cedar tree, like the colorings going up, and I had to work with the budget that they had, and so we just looked at the materials and how we could change the coloring without changing the materials, but just the design of the placement makes everything, and I just changed the entire colors of the building so it looked way more cohesive and like it's not disjointed.
Nice.
Turn the bricks into a dark charcoal, which I'm still trying to get the bricks taken out, but sometimes you have to do a little compromise.
Yeah.
And we expanded the entranceways, like probably triple
Yeah.
expansion. So it's this huge entranceway that's going to be cedar. It's going to be carved. And
like real welcoming
like
doors.
real welcoming. It's going to have
Wow.
a copper inlay
Nice.
and the story carved into the entranceway is going to be a family with berry baskets, and it's going to have the plants and the berries that used to be in that place, and we're also going to be planting those around the building. And I could go on and on about the changes that have been made, even to the concrete when you drive up. That's been completely changed, and the exterior has also been completely changed. But it's all having to work within the budget that they set aside. And
So coming in late into the process is still doable. It's never too late. Is what I would
it's
think.
never too late.
Never too late, and it's not about extra budget. It's not about that. It's about doing things in a meaningful way. Of course, you thankfully already have such great connections with the community. We've built a big network here in Aboriginal Health with the elders and residents team here that we run past all of our big projects or any of our ideas or concepts. They're always willing to hear us and guide us and give us their endorsement or say, we don't think you should do that. They don't often do
How
that.
about you do it
Yeah,
this
how
way
about this
instead?
way? Yeah, they redirect us, which is absolutely fantastic. And we're we're brought up to listen,
Yeah.
right? There's no questioning and there's no negotiation once you've been told, no dear, you need to go this way. And I think when it came to First and Clark, I know it's been lots of people involved in the conversation, lots of discussion, and well-meaning folks again. So I'm glad that you were able to get there. I don't know when this building is actually going to break ground and start being built. Is it coming?
It is coming.
Yeah.
We're going to move into the interior in November, and I believe it breaking ground next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's coming.
So it's coming, and it'll be so fascinating to watch, the work, and when it's built, and when it's finished, and when we drive by someday and we go, wow, look at that. That's where Tiffany, Aboriginal Health made a difference. And we can see it, and we can feel it, and maybe those same people that were in Kalalalalem looking and sitting in the waiting room and going, this was made for me. Maybe we'll see more of our Indigenous people who we know already are accessing or in need of access to that type of, withdrawal and detox and supports to be well, to get well. We'll find it more comforting to be able to arrive there.
The biggest thing that we stressed and I refused to back down on was the entrance. We'll just go with the entranceways. We just really wanted everybody. It doesn't matter your nationality, anything. To be like, you are safe here. This is a welcoming space. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, we had you in mind. You've arrived now,
yeah.
Right? That's really what it needs to say is, we had you in mind. We
and
knew
the
you would
materials
come.
chosen specifically are healing materials.
Mm. So Tiffany, this has been absolutely amazing. Our very quick conversation here, just bringing the rest of our Vancouver Coastal Health folks into what we're doing here and the work that you're doing in particular. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I really want to kind of package this all up at the end with a bit of understanding about how it started, the challenges of starting to where we're at now, the progress that you've been able to make in the short 3 years of tapping on the door. Now the door is wide open to you, and the opportunities, I think, are finally there for us to really embrace and enter into that. I'm going to call it reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, help us to bring that back together about where you started, where it's at now.
Mm-hmm. It started out with no Indigenous design guidelines, very minimal engagement and inclusion in the built form context of Vancouver Coastal Health.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much kind of starting from the bottom. There were plenty of times where I would get scoffed at by architects, male architects, and you just really had to learn how to override it and how to read in between the lines and figure out where you could jump in strategically.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, we just realized where the gaps were, and we've been working on filling those gaps the past 3 years. We were, at the beginning, we were brought on 2 to 3 years too late. After the business plan process was done, the RFP process was done, we were brought on to be a part of the scored elements, but we had no say, very minimal say in the scored elements, so we were being asked to go along with infrastructure that had already been bought, the design had already been bought, and so we knew we didn't have a lot of room to work within that.
Yeah.
Fast forward to now, because we figured out how to maneuver that and how to get around that without increasing the budget that we were given too much. People have started to realize that there is a lot of worth and a lot of potential to relationship building, which is reconciliation. And so now there's a couple projects coming up now where we are being asked to be a part of it from the very, very beginning, from the business planning stage, which means that we can build the engagement timeline and plan and process and budget and scored elements, everything into the very beginning.
Intentions. We're raised to, our elders have always taught us to set up our good intentions. If our intention is reconciliation, do you feel that we're getting there? That we're doing okay for now? I'd never expect us to be doing excellent or excelling at this point in time. You've only been around for 3 years. There's only one Tiffany right now. We hope that there'll be a team of Tiffanys, young Indigenous postsecondary students will decide to go into architecture, engineering, designing so that we can expand on our team and make sure that we have the people ready for all the asks we've been doing, right?
Yeah.
So all of this asking to be included, inserting ourselves in processes wherever we could, means once we get what we wish for, which is to be included in all of these designs and all of these new builds, we're gonna need to step up. And how are we gonna fill that, right? So we've gotta think ahead about the next few years. So recruitment is important. This act of reconciliation and ensuring that our Indigenous population is ready to share with us what they need to share in order for us to proceed. And I think you had mentioned earlier about placement, about finding our way, finding our voice in these processes and how that relates to reconciliation. Can you give us a bit more about that?
Well, I see this work, the lens that I see it through is tackling displacement trauma that has been put in place through colonization, which is the experiences of my parents, my elders, people before me, and now, I'm a new generation who has been born into a third space. And so that's the lens that I approach this work from. I can't go backwards, but I can learn from my elders and I can learn from the past, but I have to decipher and turn it into something that's not from the past, not from the future. I call it also like Indigenous futurisms.
Yes.
And that's our way of reconciliation and moving forward because it gives the power back to us.
Yeah. I love that. Because we've talked about how particular urban Indigenous people find their land, find their place. Because we're also, one of our cultures is knowing who you are and where you come from. And all of these generations of displacement, of not being able to live on your homelands, your unceded homelands, lack of housing in your unceded homelands. So you come to the urban setting and becomes your home. But yet there isn't this identity attached to this land. So finding identity within the concrete jungle. A way of doing that is by creating spaces and places for gathering, so that if you wanted to find your people, you would have a place to do that. That's another one of the ways that we can ensure that people have a sense of belonging.
And I mean, another important thing I think to talk about is Vancouver. We are under the safety and the spiritual protection of the Squamish Musqueam in Tsleil-Waututh. I'm a visitor, You know, a lot of urban Native people, Indigenous people, Métis, Inuit are also visitors, and we're under their spiritual guidance. And so the buildings and the designs that we put into the buildings need to be telling the ancestral story of the land. And so not every building is a carbon copy of one another. Each is like has its own story.
Absolutely. Well, because wherever it is geographically, whatever neighborhood, street block it's on, has a different significance for the Squamish and Musqueam, who actually did share territory. Many of the areas where they would come to harvest together, right? It wasn't a matter of you stay on your side of the line and we stay on our side. There was a lot of sharing and lots of cultural practices and language sharing. So, Tiffany, this has been absolutely fabulous. As you know, I am just in awe of everything you do and so appreciative of you joining our team and having the generosity and the patience to work through some of those very difficult conversations. And I know them well.
Yeah.
You know, I've been often the one and only Indigenous voice in the room. In the organization, you know, at times, so I know how difficult sometimes it can be to stand in our power as Indigenous women, as Indigenous people, not selling out on our own values and what we've been taught and our purpose. And the purpose and intent in you is strong, and I love it. I love that unwavering commitment to the principles you've identified already, the reciprocal accountability, that reciprocity, that ability to make sure that everything is processed, that the community has been engaged early in an authentic and meaningful way. You make us look good.
Oh, stop.
And I appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing First and Clark when it's done, and seeing Dogwood Pearson when it's done, and seeing 301 East Hastings when it's done, and you know, all the places that you will be able to put your mark on behalf of the Indigenous population and changing how people feel when they walk into our buildings. It's all part of their healing. My hands go up to you. I thank you so much. Your generosity, your patience, and your expertise.
Thank you for the opportunity to do this work.
It's great. Thank you.